Today we have religious leaders, Catholic, Jewish, and Protestant, telling their members that Americans are being cheated out of a Christian nation and that our legal system was based on the 10 Commandments. These religious leaders have their own version of history, their own historians, and their own colleges, universities, and even law schools rewriting the history of our nation. They want to abolish the constitutional principle of separation of church and state. Many religious leaders claim that American law is based on the 10 Commandments. They are dangerously wrong. American law is based on the constitutional principle of separation of church and state. The U.S. Constitution is a secular document. It does not mention Christianity. In fact, the Constitution refers to religion only twice in the First Amendment, which bars laws respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, and in Article 6, which prohibits religious tests for public office. Both of these provisions are evidence that our founders wanted to keep church and state separate. Our government was set up as a republic, not a theocracy. Theocracies never respect the rights of religious minorities. On the other hand, those countries that separate religion and government are routinely the most prosperous and free of internal strife. The U.S. Constitution is a secular document. It begins, "We the people," and contains no mention of God or Christianity. The Founding Fathers did not create a secular government because they disliked religion, but because they loved freedom even more. Many were believers and many were not, but what they had in common was religious liberty. Yet they were well aware of the dangers of church and state unions in Europe. Our Founding Fathers knew the separation of church and state was the only way to ensure religious freedom in the New World. During the American colonial period, alliances between religion and government produced oppression and tyranny on our own shores. Imagine that. The people left Europe to get away from religious tyranny and political persecution, and what did they do once they got here? They made religious laws that restricted the freedom of minorities and unbelievers. Many colonies, for example, had provisions limiting public office to those with certain religious beliefs. Some colonies had officially established churches and taxed all citizens to support them, whether they were members or not. Dissenters faced imprisonment, torture, and even death. Later came the Sunday laws that would punish anyone that worked or enjoyed themselves on Sunday. To this day, these laws are still on the books, but not enforced. Google blue laws. Could this ever happen in America again? Many political and religious leaders are calling for a one-world government and a one-world religion as the only way to solve the crisis in our world. And whose version of morality do they want to enforce? Pope Benedict calls for a new world order. Pope Benedict, in his first Christmas address on Sunday, urged humanity to unite against terrorism, poverty, and environmental blight, and called for a new world order to correct economic imbalances. Today we have religious coalitions trying to unite church and state. They have introduced House and Senate resolutions to have the 10 Commandments acknowledged as a part of our Western law. These laws violate the constitutional principle of separation of church and state. House Resolution 598 is a resolution supporting the goals of the Ten Commandment Commission and its supporters for their key role in promoting and ensuring recognition of the Ten Commandments as the cornerstone of Western law. Senate Resolution 483 is a resolution recognizing the first weekend of May 2008 as Ten Commandment Weekend. House Resolution 598 and Senate Resolution 483 are clearly religious in nature and do not belong in our government. It sounds like a noble cause on the surface, but religious legislation is a violation of our Constitution. Religious liberty depends upon the strict separation of church and state. It protects our churches from government interference and protects the people from religious tyranny. These laws look innocent enough, but what if every religion submits their own House and Senate resolutions to the government? Religious liberty will be a thing of the past. The Ten Commandments are not the cornerstone of our Western law. Our country was not founded as a theocracy. Our law is the Constitution and Bill of Rights. America's laws are secular in nature because our founding fathers had respect for religious liberty and feared church and state unions. Religious legislation will lead to a theocracy. Religion, or the duty which we owe to our Creator and the manner of discharging it, can be directed only by reason and conviction, not by force or violence, and therefore all men are equally entitled to the free exercise of religion according to the dictates of their conscience, unpunished and unrestrained by the magistrate. Patrick Henry. A theocracy is nothing more than 51% of the people with good intentions taking away the religious freedom of the other 49% and feeling really good about it. We should oppose all laws that are religious in nature. They are against our constitutional principles of separation of church and state. Our government should pass civil laws, not religious laws. Let's look at the Lemon Test. The Lemon Test was formulated by Chief Justice Warren Burger in the majority opinion in Lemon v. Kurtzman, 1971. The court's decision in this case established the Lemon Test, which details the requirements for legislation concerning religion. It consists of 3 prongs. Number 1, the government's action must have a secular legislative purpose. Number 2, the government's action must not have the primary effect of either advancing or inhibiting religion. Number 3, the government's action must not result in an excessive government entanglement with religion. If any of these 3 prongs are violated, the government's action is deemed unconstitutional under the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. There are religious laws and there are civil laws. Religious laws legislate morality or establish some aspect of religion. Civil laws protect your inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We have a separate duty to society and a different obligation to God, but they must be kept separate. The United States was not founded to be an officially Christian nation or to espouse any official religion. Our country is neutral on religious matters, leaving such decisions to individuals. Our country has allowed a broad array of religious groups to grow and flourish and guarantees every individual American the right to determine his or her own spiritual path or to reject religion entirely. As a result of this policy, Americans enjoy more religious freedom than any people in the world. We should be proud of this accomplishment and work to preserve the constitutional principle that made it possible, the separation of church and state. Let's dissect the 10 Commandments and see which laws are to be rendered to Caesar, which means our duty to our government, and which are to be rendered to God alone. Most churches today are nothing more than right or left-wing political machines with a tax-exempt status. Many religious leaders want our government to enforce their version of morality and the 10 Commandments. They do not believe in the separation of church and state. Let's take a look at the 10 Commandments. Clearly, when you read them, you will see that the 10 Commandments are religious requirements, with the exception of number 6, 8, and 9, murder, theft, and slander, laws which are secular in nature. The prohibitions against murder, theft, and false witness, being found almost universally throughout human society, are more accurately viewed as essential conditions for any society to survive and function. Before we analyze the 10 Commandments, remember that religious laws belong in a theocracy. Civil laws belong in a republic or democracy. And America was founded as a republic, not a theocracy. In a famous passage about taxes, Jesus said, "Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." Over the centuries, many Christians have based their attitudes towards government on this passage. Jesus' statement establishes two separate realms, Caesar's and God's, and that the people should render to God what is due to God and render to the government the things that a free society requires of them. Our founding fathers understood these principles and set up a government with a separation of church and state. Jesus was put to death by the state caving into the demands of the church. It was the Jewish religious leaders that brought forth the charges against Jesus. The clergy had already passed the death sentence upon Jesus, but they needed the state to enforce their sentence. The priests were in a dilemma. They must cloak their hypocrisy. They must not allow it to appear that Christ had been arrested on religious grounds. If they accused Jesus of breaking a religious law, it would have no weight with the Roman governor Pilate. The religious leaders must make it appear that he was violating the common or civil law, and then he could be punished for treason. They had tried to entrap him when they asked him the question, "Is it lawful for us to give tribute unto Caesar?" Mark 12:17 reads, "And Jesus answering said unto them, Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." And they marveled at him. Holding in his hand the Roman coin upon which were stamped the name and the image of Caesar, he declared that since they were living under the protection of the Roman power, they should render to that power the support or taxes that it claimed, so long as it did not conflict with their duty to God. The religious leaders failed in their plot to get Jesus to say the wrong thing. In conclusion, the 10 Commandments are not the source or foundation of our Western law. Commandments 1 through 4 are religious in nature and should not be enforced in a republic or democracy. If the first 4 commandments were enacted into law today, they would violate our constitutional right to religious freedom. Religious requirements have no place in a republic or a democracy. Governments are established to serve the needs of the governed, As such, they must ensure the protection of the population's inalienable rights, including freedom of conscience. When a citizen causes harm to other people or their property, it is the government's job to punish them. Commandments 5 through 10 deal with our relationship to our fellow man or woman. Let's take a look at these individually. Commandment number 5. Honoring your parents should not be a law, but it is sound advice. You can punish someone for harming their parents, but you can't punish them for not honoring them. Who would decide what honor really means? The government? Commandment number 6, 8, and 9 are secular in nature. Our Republican Constitution protects you, your possessions, and your reputation. Laws regarding murder, theft, and false accusations are common to all societies and protect the inalienable rights of all citizens. Laws against murder, theft, and slander are found almost universally throughout human society and are more accurately viewed as essential for any society to survive and to function than they are from any specific culture, such as ancient Israel or Christianity. Number 7, thou shalt not commit adultery, should not be a part of our Western law, but it is definitely good advice for all couples unless you want to end up in the divorce courts. Commandment number 8, thou shalt not kill. This is an essential law for any civilized society to survive. Our legal system recognizes that there are exceptions to murder, such as self-defense or accidental death. Commandment number 9, thou shalt not bear false witness. Slander is an untruthful oral, spoken statement about a person that harms the person's reputation or standing in the community. Because slander is a civil violation, the injured person can bring a lawsuit against the person who has made the false statement. If the statement is made via broadcast media, for example over the radio or on TV, it is considered libel rather than slander, because that statement has the potential to reach a very wide audience. Perjury is illegal, but telling your best friend you love her bad hairdo is hardly a basis for a criminal action. Commandment number 10. Not coveting your neighbor's goods is just sound advice. If you desire your neighbor's goods too much, you may end up stealing them, and then it would be a punishable crime called theft. The minute that coveting turns into stealing, then it becomes a crime that is punishable in our legal system. We don't punish people for thought crimes. Our conclusion is that the 10 Commandments were not the foundational cornerstone of America's Western law. America's laws are civil in nature, not religious. America is not a theocracy. It was founded as a republic. Our government is mixing religion and politics, and we are moving into dangerous waters called a theocracy. No signs of the 10 Commandments or religious laws can be found anywhere in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. The obvious conclusion is America's government is based on the principle of separation of church and state, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights, not biblical laws. Our country should enforce civil laws, not religious laws.